Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, ever faithful, sometimes, attorney. How you doing?
As long as the Lord can say good and faithful servant, well done, I will be doing great.
You will be. It's a big gift. It's a big gift. But, we're praying yet for you.
Hey, someone prayed for me, had me on their mind, and took the time. I am so glad they prayed.
You know what Jesus says? Some things come only through fasting and prayer. Some of these things, praying may just not be enough. How was your weather? Your week?
Sadly, it's been beautiful weather, although the week has just been, I don't know if it's going to be a reminiscent, because I know last week we talked about various hurts, particularly church hurt. And then this week it's been just a lot of hate going on. We had the shooting in Colorado. Of course, we had Charlie Kirk, which I know we'll get into. And then the response from people, including the president of the United States, pointing fingers. It's just been, I don't know. It was one of those where God is bringing out the sunshine, but yeah, we as people are bringing in the rain.
Ooh, come on now. Rain. Well, into every life, some rain must fall.
Well, what about you? Maybe you've got some happiness that was happening last week that you're like, I gotta stand on my blessing, man. My blessing got me through.
I this week, probably more than any week, I realized the benefit of a recent partnership that I've gotten into with my business, and so this week probably sort of solidified that for me. It's like, you know what, this is the time. This is what I've been needing. This is what I've been looking for the past several years at least. Many of you know that I was an entrepreneur for 18 years and ran my own practice. And just recently I partnered with a larger national group. And so we're now delivering care to a variety of different patients, but we're doing specialized care. And so I'm really excited about getting started with that aspect. This week I had one of my cancer patients. We follow cancer patients for 5 years. You're not considered cured until you've gone 5 years and been cancer free. And I saw one that I've grown quite attached to. And it turns out that this was his last visit to. It was 5-year mark. And we always give him a celebratory card. Congratulations. Thank you for letting us participate in your care. And I said, man, most of my other cancer patients I'll no longer be able to see because it's beyond the scope of my practice. And so those were the ones with whom I gained most closest relationship with. And I was just really glad to be able to close this week out seeing this guy in particular. And so, I don't know, that was bittersweet. I was glad that, we got to walk him through all of his treatment. I will be sad to see that some of my other patients are gone, but I'm excited about what the next is for me. And so we did a lot of renovations around my property and everything, and repaved the parking lot, repainting everything, the exterior. I don't like the price tag of it at all, but it's kind of nice to be able to look at it and you see the building get refreshed and it's a whole new building, and I get excited about that kind of thing. So that was the highlights of my week, at least.
I had to pay for a refrigerator and I was not happy. So perhaps, you're trying to give me another way of seeing it, but I'm like, I did not want to do that. And it's not for me either. So, well, I guess it's for me. It's for my tenant, but nonetheless, I did not enjoy having it. It didn't bring me the joy that it brings you to see it.
Of course, because you don't get to see it. I get to see it every day. I get to pull in like, beautiful. But yeah, I guess it is a little bit different when you don't get to immediately enjoy the fruits of your expenditures.
Well, and then interesting enough, I've been seeing a lot of farmers, particularly in Arkansas, but I'm sure, across the country, that have been begging for help from the Trump administration. And I only, what made me, of course, think of that was in purchasing that refrigerator, as well as and looking at the insurance premium that just shot up for my home, I'm like, man, it is really expensive around here. And I know, I think Whoopi Goldberg mentioned how she works because she needs to, and got a lot of backlash because, of course, they're saying, well, you're a celebrity, you don't feel our pain. But I'm thinking, hey, even as you increase your money, you increase perhaps your lifestyle, you increase what you have responsibilities for. And so, I mean, it's definitely not all relative, but at the same time, I can understand why she empathizes with what a lot of American people are going to in terms of the cost of living right now.
It ain't what you make, it's what you get to keep. So when it all goes out, at the end of the day, you see a lot of celebrities who die destitute, no money, and people look at them and say, "Yeah, oh, that was wasteful. You had all of that money," and some of it, they should take some accountability for that as well. But if you start also looking at what are some of the other expenses, one of my mentors, I spoke a lot about him this past week, was the owner of a funeral home, and this guy believed in, I mean, he was the largest Black-owned funeral home in the state of Ohio. And he believed in putting the money back into the business. And that probably was part of his downfall, too, was because he always wanted to expand and always make it better, make it better, make it better. And then at the end of the day, you run into financial problems because you're like, at some point you reach a point of diminishing returns. The more you put into the business to try to grow it and make it better, let your people have a really nice product that they can be proud of. And then eventually there's some diminishing return on that. And you're like, okay, now I'm in over my head. And so it's not that everybody just willy-nilly just throws away their wealth and their fortune. Sometimes it's in an attempt to expand, in an attempt to improve on what you already have. Sometimes those decisions in the financial, they come back to haunt you because of the financial consequences of them. And so I know we typically go on and on about the news, but we'll just go ahead and get into the topic for today. This past, what was it? Thursday was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And again, there was also... Wednesday, I think, the 10th. The 10th.
The 10th.
The 10th.
Oh, the 10th.
Before the
okay.
11th, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what day that was. Sorry. Well, I don't know if it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember, but nonetheless, that we also had a shooting at a Colorado school, I think killed 2 people, I want to say. But, don't quote me if that's not true. But we do know there was a shooting at a high school in Colorado. And it's just been, like I said, it's been a hate-filled week. But what's really disturbed me has been some of the, responses. I think there was a journalist on MSNBC who pointed out that, sometimes when you are spewing certain rhetoric, certain hate speech, you are inviting such hate. And he was subsequently, I think his name is Matthew Dowd. I think he was subsequently fired. There were, I think it's a professor up in Europe somewhere that was also fired for, and I think that one I would probably more so say rightfully so, but nonetheless, she said good riddance to some degree to Charlie Kirk. There was an MTSU dean who got fired just because she said, I have no sympathy for him. I'm like, really? Wow. You're right. and I want to be clear because I know we're probably going to be critical of his speech. I have nothing but condolences for his wife and his children. I think he had a son and a daughter. Both of us have lost parents, and we were a lot older than the kids in this case. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, but it was devastating for me when I lost my father. And so I definitely can't imagine having to deal with that at such a young age. I know oftentimes people say children are resilient, but nonetheless, you're not at an age to truly be able to control your emotions or truly be able to process a reason or rhyme a reason for what's happening to you. You can sometimes all you see is just unfairness. And so, before we even get in there, I want to make sure it's very clear, nothing but condolences for the wife and the children in the situation.
It's even worse. It's even worse when it happens suddenly and or happens tragically and is captured on video. The things that these children will relive throughout the rest of their lives, for the most part, is tragic. Yeah, and there's any person who celebrates the fact that a man is dead and is brutally murdered should have their heads examined. And there are people who should have their head examined. Starting with the people who actually commit these types of crimes. So there is a reason why these crimes happen, is because there's a contingency of people on both sides of the political extremism aisle that just have no sympathy, have no empathy, have no conscience. And maybe I won't say they don't have a conscience. Maybe they are so brainwashed and or deluded by their cause, and they're misled by their passion that they feel like they have to do something like this. So those are the people I think would be the ones who actually celebrate this type of thing. But the vast majority of us, and it troubles me when I hear people say Democrats and the left,
including our president. Yeah.
It bothers me when you say that, you categorize a whole group of people based off of the foolish and insane and mentally unstable actions of a few people. We don't do that necessarily. I don't do that for when the Republican lawmaker in Minnesota and her husband were killed. I don't attribute that to the entire Republican Party. I say that there are a couple of nuts that don't represent the entire party who did this heinous act. And by the same token, there are a couple of nuts in the Democratic Party who did this and who condone it and or who celebrate it. The vast majority of people in this country will condemn this type of action and have sympathy for their parents. For the children, and also for the spouse and any family member, loved ones. I have sympathy for the people who love Charlie Kirk and who really were inspired by him. And now they have to deal with, how do we process this thing? And so to make broad sweeping generalizations that, a whole group of people are celebrating X, Y, or Z and then demonize that group based off of your assumption is wrong.
And I think you said Republican lawmakers. I think there were Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota, but yes, we did not. Yeah. And again, starting with the president, the fact that his first response is, "Oh, this is the left." And we didn't even know who the shooter was. They had no information. And I think they thought it was one person, and then they ended up letting that person go. And that person has spoken out about how tragic it is to be accused of killing, because you can imagine the immediate hate. And if we talked about this before, people will see the lie and believe it well before they will even read the retraction. But even I think they have since called the shooter. I don't want to say his name is Tyler Robertson. And some of his family members did talk about how he recently just started reading a lot more, consuming a lot more of what was going on politically. I'm not sure which by the hour, but to your point, it doesn't matter, because I feel like we as a country, or perhaps even as globally, we are becoming so immune to the shootings. I mean, we intuitively, instead of, and I definitely didn't like the first response of Republicans, but in the past, when we have these mass shootings, they say, well, just thoughts and prayers. Okay, yes, we can pray, but there is a call to action. And even if that call to action is to start sowing amends across the aisle, or even, of course, a lot of it is gun reform and all this kind of stuff. But to simply, now we've shifted to, okay, forget the thoughts and prayers. We're just going to blame a group of people without any evidence, just because we want to make sure the target isn't on me or on my rhetoric, my own accountability, which I do think is partly the reason why Donald Trump said what he said, like, hey, don't put the finger at me. This is the left fault. And it's completely insane that is where we are. And Nancy Mace the same came out with the reporter and said, "Oh, this is all on the Democrats."
The Dems only.
And even when the reporter brought up Minnesota, "Oh, you're trying to change the subject. We're talking about Charlie Kirk. Okay, well, let's talk about the Colorado shooting. That happened simultaneously. No. We need to stick to Charlie Kirk." And then we're now lowering flags and trying to say, let's have a prayer in the Congress chambers. Okay, we weren't doing that before. And so again, I feel like the response has made us so that one, we're immune to the tragedy, but also now we're more adding fuel to a fire instead of trying to pull it back. I did appreciate the House Speaker saying, "Hey, let's tone some of this down." But again, when you have the leader saying, "Oh, this is all on the left," and you're not holding him accountable. No, we've talked about this before. You have to hold your leaders accountable for how they are not either helping or continuing to incite a situation. You become part of the problem. And we can't have an honest conversation about some of the rhetoric that even Charlie Kirk spewed, because even saying that means that you're being disrespectful to his death or to the feelings that his family is going through.
Is it too soon then? Is it too soon to have this conversation? and I would say that maybe it would be too soon, but the problem is that people on the other side are having the conversation themselves. And then when you, out of respect for the loss of a life, a very prominent life, for the hurt and the grief of his family that now are left to mourn his death, we try to hold back and we don't comment on it. We don't rebut some of the other rhetoric that's coming out. Then we leave that rhetoric unaddressed, and that becomes the truth. That becomes the narrative that is projected. And so, of course, by the time you get ready to actually defend it, then, or at least rebut some of the nonsense that is being put out there, then you're deemed as being callous and disrespectful of the dead. But here's the thing that got me. I listened to President Trump's, I should call him President Trump's message from the Oval Office when this happened. And first of all, he took, I think, a moment to do it from the Oval Office, which is, that doesn't too often happen. So that speaks to the gravity, or how they view the gravity of this incident. No mention of the Colorado shooting. No mention of the kids that were injured. I don't think they were killed yet. I think they were just injured and may still be actually in critical or in the hospital still right now, I believe.
Yes.
That was the last I heard, as of yesterday. But no, not even a gloss over, not even a cursory mention of the tragedy that happened with these young children, but the tragedy that happened with their political savior, their political, and I'm sorry if that's offensive or anything like that, but some people really do believe that he's like the savior of that political party because of his profound impact on young voters and recruiting young voters to the Republican Party. He was excellent. He was an excellent political advocate.
Very good influencer, no doubt. Very good influencer. For those that don't know, he was a conservative activist and a big advisor to Donald Trump.
Yeah, he was very influential, very articulate, and he was excellent at what he did. Now, to say that was a representation of Christ is a misnomer, but that's a different story, and we'll talk about that hopefully later. But I was aghast when I saw President Trump from the Oval Office say things like, he started off pretty good. He's like, when we constantly demonize a group of people day after day and year after year, that type of rhetoric lends to this type of action here. And I was like, well, thank you for saying that. But then the immediate thing that came out of his mouth after that was, he was like, these extreme radical leftists. And I'm like, they're the ones, you just did what you just condemned us other people for doing. You just did it in the same breath. You did precisely the thing that you said we should stop doing. So what you're saying is that The people on the left should stop doing it, but the people on the right should continue to do it. And unfortunately, I see that happening over and over and over again. Everybody said, we need to tone down the rhetoric. Tell those Democrats to tone it down. What about you? And even saying that, you're not toning it down, you're escalating it even further. So I'm like, the lack of situational awareness and self-awareness is astounding to me.
Well, I want to be clear because, I mean, you spoke so glowingly of him, and I want to make sure people understand some of the words that he had said. And one of my big source of news is Ateo, because, and this is they're not paying me, but this is an independent news source, and so they have sources.
Maybe someday they will.
All right, they have sources citing. So he said about this is Charlie Kirk. He said about Black people happening all the time in urban America. Prowling Blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. And again, back to your earlier point, the first thing Donald Trump says, hey, when you spew certain type of things, you invite this to happen. And again, definitely not deserve death. But again, hear your own words and see if your own party is doing this. He said about Black pilots, if I see a Black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. As it pertains to Black women, they're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. In terms of civil rights, he said, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the mid-1960s. In terms of the death penalty should be public, should be quick, should be televised. I think at a certain age, it's an initiation. At what age should you start to see public executions? Democrats, the Democrat Party supports everything that God hates. Empathy. I can't stand the word empathy. Actually, I think empathy is made up a new age term that does a lot of damage. Feminism, reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor. You're not in charge. Gay people, you might want to crack open that Bible of yours, and a lesser reference part of the same part of scripture is in Leviticus 18 is that thou shalt lay with another man, shall be stoned to death. Just saying. So, Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, the chapter before, affirm God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters. George Floyd, this guy was a scumbag. The Great Replacement Theory, it's not a great replacement theory. It's a great replacement reality. Just this year, 3.6 million foreigners will invade America. 10 to 15 million will enter by the end of Joe Biden's term. Each will probably have 3 to 5 kids on average, while native-born Americans have 1.5 per couple. You are being replaced.
Native-born Americans, by the way, he's referring to as white people, but not really Native Americans. Okay.
You're being replaced by design. Guns, and I believe it was reported that he was going to have a debate on guns when he was unfortunately shot. Guns is worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment. Martin Luther King, MLK was awful. He's not a good person. He said one good thing he actually didn't believe. Muslims, they aren't even hiding their intentions. Muslims plan to conquer Europe by demographic replacement. Will Europe ever wake up in time? Palestine, I don't think the place exists. And again, on and on. And so a lot of his words did incite violence. And again, does not deserve death. And completely admonish, and whoever did, if the person that's in custody actually did this, yes, he should suffer consequences. But it doesn't take away that we then should not talk about some of the words he used, some of the rhetoric he spewed that was equally hateful. And that doesn't mean that we are then saying that he deserved death. It just means, hey, we're trying to make people not only accountable, but people change the rhetoric, tone down the tone. Otherwise, you're allowing this to continue by saying, oh, well, in order to honor him, we must continue to spew these messages that bring out such hate among a group of people.
Yeah, I think interesting to me is that the nature, and even for that matter, the timing of his death was, I'm going to use this word here, and I hope it's not offensive, and I'm going to explain what I mean by it, was poetic. And a lot of times when we use this word poetic, we think about it as being beautiful. I'm not saying that it was beautiful in the context of being poetic. I'm saying it was poetic. It was almost as if it was scripted, almost, because even the moments before he was actually shot, they were talking about gun violence, and he said how many mass murders are committed in this country a year, and he said, by counting gang violence or not, things in this typical antagonistic and contrarian tone. He said that there was some question also about how many mass murders are committed by transgender people. And those were the two questions or whatever that he was answering right before he himself was shot. And as you said, he mentioned in the past that he thought that some deaths are absolutely necessary and worth the preservation of the Second Amendment. I wonder if he'd still have that perspective when the death is one of his own family members, and now, unfortunately, in this situation, his own. The Bible tells us that as Christians, we should count it an honor when we are persecuted for righteousness' sake. If you really believe that, then your family members, if you believe that he was killed for the sake of Christ, then maybe it doesn't really ease the grief at all any, but maybe you can find solace in the fact that this person died in support of something that he truly believed in. And obviously he truly believed in the Second Amendment. So maybe and hopefully his family will still, if they believe as strongly about the Second Amendment as he does, they will find some solace in saying, he died supporting that which he believed in. And what little comfort it brings, perhaps, for some of us, it's like my father died in a boating accident. There was some solace that I was able to take by saying he died doing what he loved. He had just got the boat. He had dreamed all of his life for this boat, to have a boat. And when his youngest child graduated high school, he's like, now it's time for me to do something to celebrate myself. He bought a boat, probably had that boat for 2-3 months before he died in that his death was, in a sense, in the same sense that I'm using this one. His death was poetic because it was spoken of. It was scripted by the life that he led and his own aspirations. In fact, that morning that my father died, my mother said, all our kids are grown now. There's nothing to live for now but to die. And I would call even my own father's death in that same context, in that same vein, poetic. Pleasant? No. Desirable? No. But you can find some solace in the fact that, hey, this person died for the thing that they were passionate about. And, unfortunately, somebody said he almost predicted his own death by saying, hey, some gun deaths are necessary to protect the Second Amendment. And maybe his death right now will further advance his cause in protecting Second Amendment rights. I don't know. That would be an odd defense of it for me, but who knows what happens after that. I do believe that, however, I'm concerned mostly about how people canonize this man and make him almost a saint because he proclaimed he confessed publicly and repeatedly his belief in Jesus Christ and his salvation. And he quoted scripture a lot. And anytime he had this debate, people look at that and then they will say, oh, well, he was definitely a Christian. Well, I don't know how you can be a Christian and despise empathy. The Bible says Jesus was tempted in all ways, just as we are, but he didn't sin. And because he was tempted in every way, it allowed him to be empathetic with us. How can you then represent Jesus when you think empathy is a useless tool, is a useless emotion? Jesus, every time Jesus condemned sin with a sinner, he did it empathetically. He never really did it accusingly or with an accusatory bent to it. he did it. That's how he was able to draw people to him instead of repelling the very people, instead of making enemies of the ones you're supposed to make disciples of. Jesus knew how to speak the truth to them, but to speak it in love, and that they would be then consequently drawn to him. I think Charlie Kirk and his self-proclaimed disdain for empathy cut himself off from being able to speak truth to those people and win those people to Christ. Instead, he just made enemies of them by using his inflammatory, incendiary rhetoric.
But no, I have a question for you, because I do agree that you can find solace in knowing that he died doing what it is that he believed, or doing what he lived for. And we, even when it comes to Jesus, and of course he's nowhere near Jesus, we appreciate that that was his call, that was his cross to die for us.
Jesus's, you're saying?
Yes, Jesus. Okay. Yes. Again, not Charlie. The one that's hard to reconcile is, then can you truly say either you're pointing a finger or say, hey, we need to hold our speech accountable so that we're not inciting violence? Because, going back to what Donald Trump said, if you like that first part, then I don't know if you can reconcile then but I find solace in that he died for the hate that he continued to spew. I just don't know if the two can go hand in hand.
I don't know if it's that they'll find, I think the vast majority of people will find inspiration from it, if not solace.
And I'm concerned about that.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
is a concern.
That inspiration is to do more violence, probably.
Right. As well as to spew more hate. Because again, as we're reading out that hate, even if you agree with some of the stuff that he said, and I hope, I didn't agree with, most of anything. You can't take away the fact that when he talks about Black people, he is diminishing them in such a way that can only cause white people to then hate Black people. When you're saying this Black woman took this white person's job, how even a kid views that, right? When you're talking about immigrants and saying, oh, they're going to replace you, the only line then is to spew hate among people so that they then hate immigrants. And so if you find solace in that or inspiration in that, then our country is just going to continue to build on this hate. And even going, like you said, going back to the guns, if you're finding solace in, yes, people have to die before my right for the Second Amendment, then what is the result? More deaths. You become more immune to the tragedy.
Well, I don't know. Think about it. People remember every Memorial Day the sacrifice that our military have made in terms of giving their lives at the hands of sometimes heinous crimes and war and people who desire to do us harm. In defense of the United States, we can celebrate our military, those who are fallen soldiers. I'm sure some people will still celebrate the memory of Charlie Kirk and his vociferous advocacy for Second Amendment. And so even, in some really kind of, I think, sick kind of way, they'll be motivated to saying, hey, well, we need more guns. We're going to support it. We're not.
That is exactly my concern, is that people like Donald Trump and others will celebrate his memory and all this hate speech that he spewed. And incite more hate speech. And that not only does that not tone down the rhetoric that, again, Speaker Mike Johnson is trying to say, or a lot of people are trying to say, hey, let's tone this down. You're inviting more of this hate rhetoric. And that to me is why it's concerning. No, I agree. People will celebrate him. But my concern is, because people will celebrate him and have this inspiration behind the words that he says, it's only going to invite more tragedies. And subsequently, I feel like we already become a lot more immune when it comes to mass shootings, because we move on very quickly. And even with your example of, yes, we celebrate soldiers, but we usually celebrate them because they made a sacrifice for their country, not because they're going over there and shooting people left, right, up, and down. But because they're sacrificing their own lives for their country. And so I can't even equate that to what Charlie Kirk did. And maybe it's because I disagree with his hate speech 1000%. But I'm like, if you find that solace in him, I feel like you're missing a lesson in this.
Of course. The worst part about it, I get it. If you want to venerate him as an excellent political operative, then I would agree with you 100%. 100%. But if you're going to venerate him as a Christ representative in this earth, I'm going to take umbrage against that. It's to me, it's offensive to say that he was a Christ representative in this earth, because it misrepresents who Jesus Christ was completely. None of the things that he said, other than quoting scripture, aligned with the ministry, the motive, or the actions of Jesus Christ. Most of it, unfortunately, people are so distracted by the words that you speak that they don't discern the fruit of your actions. They're looking and say, "Oh well, he said he loves Jesus, so we're all on board with it." Oh, Donald Trump said we're going to have a prayer ministry in the White House, or a prayer, what do they call, a ministry of some kind of thing that Paula White heads now in the administration. Oh, because he does these perfunctory actions, they must be ordained by God. They must be committed to and representatives of Christ in the earth. No, Jesus said himself, he said, there will be many who will cry to me, Lord, Lord. And then it said, did we not heal the sick in your name? Did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not minister in your name? Did we not do all these great things in the name of Jesus? And Jesus said to them, I'll say to you, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Wow. I mean, all those good things that they did, people were healed, people were delivered, demons were cast out of people. And they recounted all these things. And Jesus called all of those things works of iniquities. Why? Not because the people who benefited from it, trust me, they didn't consider it a work of iniquity. They were happy they were delivered. They were happy they were healed. They were glad they got the prophetic word. Doesn't mean that some good didn't come from it, but Jesus called them all works of iniquity. Why? Because they were done in lack of relationship with Jesus. And so unfortunately, we can sometimes get so distracted by the end result of something that we don't discern the process. And Jesus and righteousness is discerned in the process, not necessarily the outcome. And so, yeah, you can go ahead and get all kinds of legislation that you want to pass that you think is godly legislation. But when you start discerning the process, and that process was not godly, then you have to conclude that these are much like the ones that they recounted before Jesus, works of iniquity, because you just didn't have the relationship with Jesus. And there was nothing in Charlie Kirk's speech, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to speak ill of the dead, but what I'm trying to do is to speak well and in defense of Christianity and the ministry of Jesus Christ, and to not have that profaned by an equivocation or someone trying to equate Charlie Kirk's actions to Jesus's ministry. And there's no comparison to it. So no, you will not profane Christianity by claiming that Charlie Kirk was an ambassador of Christ. No, he wasn't. He was an ambassador for the conservative Republican movement. He was an ambassador for white Christian nationalism, and he did that excellently. No discredit to him. But you will not profane the ministry of Jesus Christ by saying that Charlie Kirk advanced that. He did not.
And if you find solace, then to me, you have to acknowledge that you're a right nationalist. I mean, you like, and if you can't say that, then why I'm like, okay, What you're really trying to do is say, hey, I find solace in being able to hate another group of people. And that is my concern, is that we're not honest in our response as to the lesson that we should learn here. And because even when Jesus died, and again, I want to make sure it's clear, I agree with you wholeheartedly. He is nowhere near an ambassador for the church, because we talked about church leaders needing to do better. By no means is he, representative of the church. By no means is he representative of Jesus. Even after Jesus died, I don't think anyone thought, yes, let's do that again. Because that would be the wrong message. You are supposed to, even as grateful as we are that he sacrificed his life for us, I don't think any of us would walk in, see Jesus, and go nail him to a cross again. We should have an understanding, back to that empathy word. We should have an empathy when it comes to, hey, us putting people in a position to die. And to me, that's what his hate speech is doing. When you are telling people that because your life is what it is, because an immigrant or some Black person or someone that doesn't look like you is putting you in a position to oppress you, you are spewing hate. And to me, if you are finding solace in that, there's nowhere for our country to go. Like, I can't then be critical of that speech without you then in the reverse saying, oh, you're the reason why he died. Because there are people that are critical of his speech. And he's, to me, the poster boy for free speech. Free speech is not free. There are consequences to your speech. And so if you want to, again, going back to the Second Amendment. What'd you say?
Is his death a consequence of his speech?
I do think it is a consequence. Now, again, that does not mean he deserved it. By no means do I agree with his death. By no means would I ever tell anyone to go assassinate someone else. What I would hope for people to see is, hey, be more thoughtful in your speech. See how it is galvanizing people to hurt. It's the same thing why we put Donald Trump in a position to be convicted of insurrection. When you are inciting a group of people to go charge at the Capitol building, and subsequently you have police officers who have died or suffered serious injury, and you don't take accountability for that, you don't realize that your speech has consequences.
Yeah, I think your method reveals your motive. And if you start looking at that, you have to ask the question, are you really trying to advance the kingdom of God if your speech, the method of your delivery of this quote unquote truth, if the method of that delivery is offensive, then you can't possibly be trying to win people to Christ as a result of it. Because you can't, the Bible tells us that it's impossible that offenses may not come, but woe to him by whom they come. It's better that a millstone be tied around their neck and that they be cast into the sea than to offend one of the least of these. And when it talks about offend, it's talking about to create an obstacle from someone coming into the knowledge of the truth. And so if you really want to convey a truth to someone, you don't say it in a manner that's going to be offensive. But instead, if you say it in an inflammatory meeting, using an inflammatory method, a lot of times, especially in this age of social media, the motive is to get that soundbite, that viral clip, so that you go viral and you advance then your own political agenda, ideology. You sometimes advance your own career and your own celebrity. And that very same viral post that makes you, that excites your followers are the ones that incite your haters. The very same clip. And I think this is one of the traps of social media, is that, what sells and what goes viral is usually something that's quite incendiary. And people are like, did you believe? I can't believe he said that. We're motivated by the negative. I saw a post earlier this morning. A guy was posting about a youth choir standing out on the streets of some city. I can't remember where it was. I thought he said Woodward. but they were singing praise and worship songs. And he said, "Where's the media? Where's Channel 2 for this right now? Why is the media not capturing this?" Well, the media doesn't capture anything that doesn't capture its viewers. Let's not blame the media for it. Because the media is motivated by viewership. And so let's blame ourselves. If we were attracted to and we were moved by the positive that we saw on television, then we'd see more positive. But instead, we're moved by the negative, not only that we see on TV, but all forms of media, including social media. So even those people who start out with really good intentions are sometimes drawn into this cycle of always wanting to get the viral clips. And in order to get it, you have to say something inflammatory. And then that inflammation, that inflammatory incendiary comment that you make excites your base, but it also incites those who oppose you. So yeah, you should take some ownership for your speech as well, because there are consequences to it. People are hurt. Sometimes you are hurt by your own work, but it's that vicious cycle of just drawing you deeper into, I got to get more likes. I got to get more viral clips.
And as a Christian, because I believe the governor is going to seek the death penalty if this young man who's been charged is convicted. I don't agree with that. I don't think that the response should be to kill him. I mean, again, if we're talking about Christians,
is it just because you don't support the death penalty, period? Or do you think that the crime from a legal standpoint would justify the awarding of the death penalty?
Well, I can say from a legal standpoint, one, it'll be Utah law on that, and I'm not by any means well versed in what the legal requirements would be in that state. I'd say it for more so a Christian view of, hey, again, let's then take this, even for this extreme guy who did this, let's take this as an opportunity to teach him, listen, that is not the message we were trying to convey. And I don't know who the we is, but kids, again, he was reading some political literature. So whatever he read, I think whoever wrote it or whatever, or even if it came from us, I mean, which I doubt, but like say he said, hey, I listened to Mark and Sonia, and granted, we've never talked about Charlie Kirk, but that idea that people are certain conservatives or right nationalists are demonizing immigrants or demonizing minorities sparked in me or incited in me to go kill them. I'd be like, well, hope you missed it. Let me take this as an opportunity to try to teach you about grace, teach you about love, teach you about even responding with love when it comes to hate, even about making sure first and foremost you love your enemies. And in that love, we're not killing them, but we're trying to show them what grace and mercy means. And that is why it is so important we recognize the sacrifice Jesus made so that we understand that we didn't deserve it. That was strictly mercy, and we should have that for others.
Yeah, if we had that perspective, then we would be able to speak all kinds of truth.
But you know, Utah is considered the religious state, right? You know.
Yeah. And you saw the governor was praying 33 hours. He said, hoping and praying that it wasn't one of us. Whatever that us means. You know,
yeah.
Maybe I was hoping that it was an immigrant or somebody from another state.
Oh, I'm sure they all were. Just like when the attempted assassination on Trump, and it turned out to be one of his own people, quote unquote. Oh, well then never mind. Let me not speak on it anymore. No, this is your people.
They say be your own people. Yeah, which is interesting because it was one of Charlie Kirk's famous rebuttals about black crime. He was like, who kills more blacks, black people or white? Who kills more blacks, black people, other black people, or police officers? It's true. But the reality is that it's about, I want to say something like 81% of black murders are perpetrated by black people. But guess what? About 79% of white murders are perpetrated by white people as well. So your numbers are the same. The reason why is because people kill those persons who are most in closest proximity to them and with whom you have most interactions. And the sad reality in this country is that we are still a segregated country. We still segregate ourselves based off of most often race more than anything else. And so this whole notion about, one of his comments, I wish at one point that I could have debated Charlie Kirk. Maybe we'll debate in heaven or hell, wherever.
Well, I'm going to say that depends on if you think that facts matter, or sources matter. Because again, even by that logic, even if you think the numbers are important, who are the cause of most American deaths? Americans, not immigrants. So why are we galvanizing a group of immigrants and taking them over as if that solves crime when they commit less than 2%? And so again, yeah, you may want to debate them, but if the numbers and the facts don't matter, at some point, do you continue to go back and forth with someone who likes to or enjoys to remain ignorant?
It's interesting. So I don't have a problem with Charlie Kirk at all. Well,
I do have a problem with his rhetoric, but I do not think he deserved to die by no means.
I think in America we have the right to free speech, and you can espouse anything that you want to espouse. I think as a Christian,
including all Black people are bad. Yes, you can espouse that, and that's unfortunate.
My biggest problem is I expect the world to be the world. I expect sinners to act like sinners act. So I'm not appalled when somebody who's a sinner does something that I think is heinous. I'm not appalled by it. I'm not surprised by it. I'm moved by it to say, hey, listen, this is why we have to preach the gospel to those person and preach the gospel in love. We have to win those people to Christ, not write another law about it. We have to go out and minister to them the way that Jesus Christ ministered to them so that they can then be redeemed. Okay, that's where I am. My problem comes when a Christian behaves this way, and so most of my criticisms and everything is not just regarding Charlie Kirk as a political advocate. My criticism is him as a Christ representative, and that's for any person. It's not just Charlie Kirk. It's for Paula White. It's for Jensen Franklin. It's for all of these other white evangelicals who purport to follow after Jesus, but yet their political motives seem to take preeminence over their motive to win people for Christ. I have a problem with that. And so as I was looking at a video earlier today, and I think this guy describes a video, a social media clip, maybe TikTok or whatever. But I thought, man, he just most eloquent description of Charlie Kirk that I've heard. And he said, Google the word malicious contrarian. And he then spent the next minute and a half, 2 minutes, really just characterizing all of Charlie Kirk's existence. And I just want to read this because I did just Google it. A malicious contrarian is often characterized by behaviors that are intentionally oppositional and argumentative, typically without constructive purpose. Such individuals may exhibit traits like playing devil's advocate excessively, which can lead to frustrating interactions. They often engage in argumentative behaviors that can undermine discussions and create conflict, often without realizing the negative impact of their actions. Understanding these traits can help managing relationships with such individuals, as they may not always be aware of how their contrarian nature affects others. And he pointed out, he said, if you watch and study a lot of Charlie Kirk's interactions, when people come and ask him a question, he often would interject with something like what I call aggravators. Sometimes people throw things in a conversation that's irrelevant, but they toss those things in there as intentional aggravators to get you off of your point, to weaken you, to get you in a defensive mode, to get you upset so that they can then advance their argument and make you look like you're incompetent or make you look like you're defeated by their argument. But you'll watch a lot of times he'll interrupt questions, even when they were asking moments before his death. They were asking about gun violence, and he's like, gang or not, counting gang. You knew exactly what he was talking about, but you wanted to introduce this gang violence to change the narrative to become more offensive. You wanted to toss that aggravator out there so that you would disarm your opponent at that point and then be able to go in for the attack. And this guy also pointed out, he said, look at where he actually held most of his conferences. This man was 31 years old, well studied, well learned, very articulate in a lot of his points. And he would go on college campuses, and who did he argue against? He argued against 18 and 19-year-olds who were not nearly as articulate as he was, were not nearly as knowledgeable as he was about it. He didn't argue with the professors. You go on why don't you go on a college campus and sit down with some of your college professors who are learned, who have studied these things, and then continue to argue those same points. You choose a weaker opponent so that it makes you look like you're that much more knowledgeable and that you've won the debate. And the point is not necessarily to make a point. It's just to disarm and befuddle your opponent so that it appears that you've won the argument. And you'll see it again and again. Anytime somebody bring up a point, he also toss in a question, that an aggravator is what I call it. So wow, this is good.
Well, I mean, I know we're running short on time, but I will encourage people. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jubilee, but they have pretty much, and I'm sure Charlie Kirk has done it, but there have been Mehdi Hassan. You got to see that one. That's one of my faves. I think Amanda Stills did. I think Candace was doing. But anyways, you're sitting in a center and you're surrounded by people who essentially have opposing views. And one of when Mehdi Hassan did it, one of the people essentially came up to him and agreed that he's a fascist and that he thinks that he needs to go back to his country. And mind you, Mehdi Hassan has some Indian ancestry, but although he was born in, I think, Britain, and is an American citizen now, and yet people are telling him, you need to go back, you shouldn't be here. And at some point he says, you know what, I'm not going to argue with a fascist, and just lets them do their thing. And that's why I say, for the most part, I can see, even if you had an opportunity to debate with a Charlie Kirk, if you're so stuck on believing what you want to believe that you're not even giving me an opportunity to educate, which I don't even think professors would want to debate this guy, because again, you're not going to give me an opportunity to educate, then there's just no point. I don't want to hear the hate that you're spewing, and I'm trying to at least get you to see how reckless it can be. Even if I agree with some of your points, which I doubt I would, but even if I did, because even your presentation is with such vitriol, and I'm trying to get you to see that even that is wrong, and you refuse to allow that opportunity, then it's an exercise in futility. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, and that was the point this guy made. He said a malignant contrarian doesn't necessarily want to win the argument necessarily on the basis of merit. Only thing they do is they throw out the jabs here or there in order to excite and incite a crowd, and so that it appears as if they won that argument. And I will say that he was masterful at it. He really was masterful. And so, if I'm going to speak anything of high esteem to Charlie Kirk, was that he was good at the deception that he advanced.
Well, and I just want to encourage people, and even if you're an admirer of him, please take this as a lesson in grace. Hopefully, you will want people to be empathetic towards your position of being heartbroken. Take this as a lesson in grace. Take this as a lesson in that empathy perhaps is important. And also, even if some of the messages you felt rang true, if you do agree that violence is not the answer, then let's try to articulate that message without it being soaked in hatred and violence. The reality is that truth should never really be offensive. And people who say that truth hurts, I don't know that it really does. Because the Bible says that truth is supposed to liberate. It's supposed to set free. The Bible says that Jesus is the truth.
And if you resign to the notion that truth is offensive, then you say Jesus is offensive. And Jesus was not offensive. Jesus was attractive. Jesus said, if you are offensive, you should be cast into the sea. So to say that truth is offensive is wrong. I think the delivery of truth, a lot of times that is offensive. And this is one of my favorite quotes from my book. And that is this saying, if it is impossible, I'm saying that it is impossible for us to love the sinner the way that Jesus loved the sinner and for it to be perceived as hate. If the love that we're extending or the truth that we're speaking is perceived by others to be hate, then we're not doing it the way that Jesus did. And we have to check our motives.
And we'll end on that note. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully you have been liking and commenting on the topic that we've had for today. As you know, we are here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on Saturdays. You can also catch us on your favorite podcast platform. You can catch a repeat of this episode not only on Star Radio, but also KD Live as well as YouTube. And until next Saturday, I hope you guys have a blessed and safe week.